Pastor Keith, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us exactly who is Marquise John?
Well, thank you for having me here today, Nigel. My name is Marquise Johns. Although my title is pastor, that's not what my mother named me. My name is Marquise Johns. I'm from Los Angeles, California. And in essence, what I am is just a person that I feel like God has laid a burden for souls on me and has called me from where I was and has taken me somewhere that I don't completely know where it is. I'm just being faithful to follow him.
Whenever we hear about Los Angeles, it's this big utopia of Hollywood and LA, etc. In fact, back in 2010, I did my own journey in LA. I had to speak at a convention, and then I went out there and go to the Hollywood and went to the museums, etc. But your side of LA seems to be a different place. What do you determine LA? And when you talk about LA and growing up in LA, what are the images that you conjure up?
Well, I grew up during Reaganomics, and for those who are listening or watching and who don't understand what Reaganomics are, during the time that Ronald Reagan was president, the Republican Party allowed cocaine into America. And so I grew up during that time where crack cocaine hit its height, its zenith, and every young boy aspired not to be a ball player, not to be a politician, not even to be president. We aspired to sell drugs. We aspired to be gang members. The lifestyle of Los Angeles, the inner cities of Los Angeles, was glamorized through movies like Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society. And so we mass produced, marketed, and exported a lifestyle of decadence. And so for me, when I think of Los Angeles, I think about the 80s. I think about seeing friends shot down. I think about seeing men dragged behind cars. I think about having gang affiliations and loyalty to particular neighborhoods to the extent that you'd be willing to hurt, maim, kill somebody in the name of this is my neighborhood.
And that was the LA that you were growing up.
That was the LA I grew up.
So this whole Hollywood, nice, pretty scene that everybody charge. Welcome to LA from, you know, when you look American Idol, you see this, welcome to LA, welcome to Hollywood.
Well, in truth, if you were to go to Hollywood and walk down Hollywood Boulevard, it's full of cross-dressers, it's full of homeless people, it's full of drug addicts. So the glamorization that was once associated with Hollywood, well, that's been dead for over 60 years. I mean, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and maybe even early 50s and 60s, someone could have aspired to a life of movie and television and got on a Greyhound and drove out, and it was glamorous. I mean, the Hollywood sign, the lights, the cameras, the action, but that's been gone for at least 3 decades. I mean, from the time I grew up, even when breakdancing and hip-hop burst onto the scene, if you went to Hollywood, you were met by drug addicts, you were met by the disenfranchised, you were met by some of the people who 10 or 15 years earlier came out to Los Angeles but now relegated to a life of poverty and were living in hotels. So that concept of glamour and glitz is something that is mass produced on occasion in Hollywood. So when you see the American Music Awards, well, that's a day, that's a moment. That's not the everyday life. So the everyday life is a hustle and it's a stressful, it's a street corner business. In fact, when I was on Hollywood Boulevard, I saw so many homeless people. And it scared me. I saw a young lady, she said, you know, I used to go to UPenn and I have a passion for acting. And I came out here and I ran out of money and I was kicked out and I ended up homeless. And I'm asking that to say this. So what led you to go on the streets in LA? I mean, my mom was a gang member. And my uncles were gang members, so it was almost like, to some degree, the family business. It wasn't optional. It kind of was and is what it was. There's a different scene in Los Angeles now because of the growth of the Hispanic population, but it was what you did. Again, remember, I grew up in a time where gangs and drugs were glamorized. It was, I mean, carrying a gun was what every young man aspired to do. And so what turned me to the streets was that's just where you went. There wasn't the option. I mean, I don't want to say that there weren't options because there's always options, but coming from the background that I did, it was almost a given. All of my uncles went to jail. Most of them were murdered. My mom's brothers were murdered because of their gang affiliations. Most of them sold drugs or succumbed to crack addictions, as did my mother and my father. So it just was par for the course, if you will.
And what raised your self-expectancy during this entire ordeal? What were the things that caused you to start saying, you know what, I'm tired of the streets. I'm tired of this gang game. It was drugs everywhere. I'm tired of hustling and doing drugs. What created that need for some measure of beyond the average? Where did you get that epiphany?
My mother was really hard on me when she was preparing me for school, and in those moments preparing me for grade school, she made me learn. And from that point on, from 4 years of age until I was about 5 or 6, she was very hard on me about school. And so from that point on, it all came very easy to me. So school was never a challenge. So even though I had this street life, if you will, I still enjoyed reading. I still enjoyed learning. And so because it didn't come so hard, it was my outlet. Reading, The Count of Monte Cristo, The Tale of Two Cities. Charles Dickens was one of my favorite authors. Those things provided an escape for me. I was able to imagine bigger than my surroundings. And so that for me was what happened. I was into Langston Hughes and those type of things. So in my schooling, I was always propelled up front. I was the person who had to who did the Christmas play or who did the poetry for the school. And so these two things, my love or my affinity for reading and knowledge, as well as my natural knack for performing, are the things that kind of gave me an outlet that most others probably don't have.
And did that help you to develop your self-esteem? Did that help you to grow your personal brand? How did that help you as an individual?
I mean, of course it did, because I was articulate. In a land flowing with guns and drugs, I was articulate, and being able to enunciate and being able to use polysyllabic words made me king. It made for a very interesting young man, because of the fact that here I was, this kid who my mom was a drug addict, but I was able to speak well, and I was articulate, and I was very charismatic, and so that those things caused the gang members who liked me to like me and tell me to aspire for more.
So what about the ones who hated you? Because in any given day, you're going to have those who like you and those who hated you. And how the streets run is that you're going to always have a majority who hate you against those who like you. So how did you handle those who hated you?
The same way I handle it today. I believe that there are two pervasive mindsets as it pertains to Marquise Johns. Either you love me or you hate that you love me. And most people weren't necessarily hating me as much as they were envious of the things that I was able to do, and because all of us really want more and want better, and so unfortunately there's the crabs in the barrel mentality where you see somebody pulling themselves up and you want that, and so you either try to climb on their back or pull them down, and so the people who, if you will, hated on me just caused me to work harder. So
you're basically saying that, look, growing up in LA, there was this era in which you grow through. It was streets, it was gangs, it was drugs, but out of that you were able to aspire to become somebody better.
Yeah.
So good that you're actually saying that. We'll be right back after this short break. Hello everybody, this is Nigel, the host of Reaching Up Show, and I want to talk to you about an exciting thing my team and I has been able to put together. We wanted to give away 1,000 copies of my book, Life's Ultimate Ticket. You know, many of you guys don't know, but I'm actually a guy who once upon a time was a gang member, was dropped out of high school, was kicked out of high school actually, and I got a second chance to make it back. I graduated college, I went on to be a school teacher and then a psychiatric counselor. Today I'm an author, a business owner, and I wanted to make this book available to you. We're giving away 1,000 copies. So if you go to reachingup.net and sign up there, we can tell you how you can get one for yourself. Now when it's done, it's done. We only have 1,000 copies. So you go there right now, reachingup.net. This is for you. Get yours today. Thank you. Welcome back to Reaching Up. We're here talking with Pastor Marquis John, who's come from the streets of Los Angeles, and he's telling us of his journey from the gangs, the streets, and from the drug life to today becoming a prominent speaker and an inspiration to so many others. Pastor Johns, you were sharing with us of how you've been able to get through the period when you raise your self-esteem because of your ability to read and use polysyllabic words. Tell me a little bit of some of the things that help you to think through that.
Again, I love to read. I remember on one occasion reading through an entire Encyclopedia Britannica.
Wow.
Reading the dictionary. When I had nothing else to read, I'd read what was ever available, whether it be magazines, again, the dictionary, the encyclopedia, because I realized that he who had the most words controlled the world.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to expand my vocabulary. It was easy for me because I read proper English to speak proper English, even though I didn't understand the mechanics of the English language.
Okay.
I think that, you know, there's a principle in the Bible that by beholding you become changed. And because I read so much, and even still read to this day, it enabled me to be able to bring a thought from conception to execution.
Okay.
Which I feel like where most people, I mean, not most, but some people really lack. A lot of people have good ideas. You know, I share with people often that ideas come a dime a dozen, but it's execution that separates men from boys.
But execution requires perseverance and talent and structure. And one of the things that you've been able to acquire through the years has been a great measure of detail and structure. Would you mind sharing with us, when did you get a change in thought of structuring yourself from this street gang kid to the person of, I need to do better, I need to pull myself on this side of the tracks?
I mean, I got to be honest with you, Nigel, you never lose that edge. When you're selling drugs, you're selling drugs because you have a goal. You know, that goal could be a Mercedes-Benz, that goal could be a gold chain, it could be a new watch, it could be to get the prettiest girl. You have a goal, and so what you're doing is you're moving methodically to that goal. And I think that that's something that I've been able to carry over into every aspect of my life, is that I've set goals. And what I do is, on the way to winning the war, I measure my success by winning small battles.
Okay.
And so the detail comes from, I have my big picture, but I realize that there are some small things that I need to do in order to make that big picture. You don't come to a canvas and just start painting. You have an idea, and because you have an idea, there are colors that you need in order to execute that idea. So you go about systematically pulling those colors together, and then you kind of outline what it is that you want to do, and then you start painting different sections of that thing. And so I believe that that's what I've been able to do, because it's a carryover from a street mentality. It's okay, here is what I want to achieve, and here are the things I need to achieve, or, you know, in order to get there.
And why I'm happy that you went there, because apart from the fact that you've been on the streets, you also actually was a signed artist, and you were once a renowned rapper. Tell me, how did that actually came about? From the streets, from drugs, from gangs, shooting and killing, to become this big known artist. How did that happen?
Well, there were, around the time I was born, there was an art form, a culture, a way of life born called hip hop. Hip hop had 4 pillars. The 4 pillars of hip hop are b-boying, graffiti, rapping, and DJing. And I got into graffiti, I got into b-boying or breakdancing, but because I was a reader and I was articulate, rapping came natural for me. And so from the time I was like 9 years old, I was memorizing other people's raps, and then I began writing my own. And at which point I began writing my own, I've adopted this mentality that anything I'm going to do, I want to be the best at. So I've tried to do very few things in my life, because I realized that in order to be the best at something, you got to spend some time on that one thing. You can't be scatterbrained. You can't have 15 things that you're trying to do. You have to narrow in on 2, 3 things that you want to do, and then make sure that you're putting your best foot forward to be the best at those things. And so that's what I did. And anything I needed to do in order to make sure people knew I was the best, I did. I entered rap contests. I went to concerts. What you call battle. I battled the likes of Mobb Deep. I battled Method Man. I battled guys. I would hang out at Ice-T's house. You know, I put myself in a position to make sure people knew that I was good at what I did.
Okay.
In route to being the best. And so you know, eventually, you know, you do demos, you do what you got to do, and you catch somebody's eye, you get the record deal, and you know.
So you were able to get a record deal.
Mm-hmm.
And what did achieving a record deal significantly shatter the glass ceiling that actually living on the south side of LA created?
Nah, I mean, you know, there was a lot of guys who aspire to record deals, and I've always had this mentality, I want to help people out. So I had a crew of guys that I felt like they were talented, and so for me, it was you know, pull those guys along. There were people who had achieved what I was trying to achieve, so the glass ceiling was already cracked.
Okay.
You know what I mean? All it took was you being, like you said, you know, persevering and having a plan.
Okay.
So once I achieved the record deal, that was the first step of what I wanted to do.
But through your journey, you had some tough periods also, being incarcerated and being in trouble, etc. Share with us some of the most difficult periods in your life.
In truth, you're socialized in Los Angeles during the time I came up. Jail was a rite of passage. It wasn't really. I mean, like, you know, there are stories of ancient African tribes who would take a young man to the edge of a village and tell him, listen, you got to make it back here, and when you make it back here, you're a man, you know. And he had to spend the night or spend a week or come back with a certain hide from an animal in order to prove that he had transitioned from childhood to manhood. I mean, in the Jewish culture, the bar mitzvah for the man and the bat mitzvah for the lady, you know, in truth, jail for LA became a rite of passage.
Wow.
And so for me going to jail, it wasn't such a difficulty as much it was something I knew inevitably I'd have to deal with.
And how did you deal with jail? Is jail a place you think, if you were given a chance this day and age, what would you tell some young person out there looking at you saying, you know what, I have had a tough life. I have lived on the streets. I've done drugs. I've done gangs. I've done violence. You were able to achieve some successes in the past, but I ended up in jail.
Well, Nigel, I get where you're coming from. I don't think anybody wants to go to jail anymore. You know, I think that we've moved beyond that as a society. Now we're trying to avoid it as much as we possibly can. There are still some elements in the urban neighborhoods where it's an inevitability. But what I would say is, because the African people are such a resilient people, we have made the best of the worst situations, and we've learned to, while we're in those situations, to complain as little as possible. We look back and we say, man, if I had it to do over, I'd do that or this differently. But in the moment, your primary objective is to survive. And so what I would say to a young man is, of course, you know, avoid jail like the plague. Avoid jail like you would, HIV or AIDS. Avoid it to the best of your ability, but at which point you find yourself there as I would say to someone who's contracted AIDS. You know, make the best, make your life matter, make a difference in someone else's life. So if you've been to jail like I have, you know, I've now come out of that and I'm trying to make a difference and take that experience and use it to help somebody avoid that.
So your goal is to help people to take the difficulties in life and make the best lessons that they can share with others, so that they wouldn't actually repeat the same cycle.
Absolutely.
We're going to be right back after this short break. We're listening to Reaching Up, where our goal is to help you to live better, do better, and ultimately, know better. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Reaching Up. I'm here with Pastor Marquis Johns, and we're actually having a great discussion on living for change, moving from where you are to where you want to be. He's sharing his life from coming from the south side of Los Angeles, California, and today he's actually a prominent speaker and a leader in our community here in the Washington, D.C. area, and he's been making a difference. Earlier, he was sharing with us some of the ways in which you can move yourself forward. Pastor Johns, would you mind outlining 3 critical things that a young person can do to today move themselves, irrespective of where they are, from where they are to where they can be?
Right. Well, first thing you got to do is outline a realistic goal. You could, if you're like 5'3", and you're 19 or you're 20 years old, and your goal is to be in the NBA, that may not be a realistic goal. I'm not saying that it can't happen. It's just that it may not be realistic. So what we have to do is we have to outline realistic goals. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to look at, what do I want to achieve? What are my goals? And once you outline those realistic goals, the next thing that you want to do is you want to understand, identify maybe someone who's achieved that, and then look at the steps that they took and mimic and emulate those steps. So you want to first identify the goal, and then you want to find the steps in order to achieve that goal. And a lot of times the way to do that is to look at someone who's been able to achieve that. And then the third and final thing that you want to do is surround yourself with some good people, some people who can hold you accountable, but who also can tell you how to traverse tough ground. The first thing that you're going to have to do also is, one of the things that you got to do is, no matter how smart, no matter how intelligent, no matter how handsome you are, you got to realize you don't have all the answers. And once you realize that you don't have the answers, that's when you'll be able to seek out some people who have a few more answers than you do. Now, that's not to say that you're not intelligent or that a person isn't smart, but you just don't have all the answers. And when you get around people who are doing a little bit better than you are, or have achieved some of the things you want to achieve, you'll realize they came to understand as well. They realized at some point they didn't have all the answers. In our denomination, there are some prominent guys who were church planters or evangelists, and so I linked up with them. In a mentor-mentee relationship, the mentee is going to dictate the flow of the relationship. So I linked up with these guys. They've allowed me to shadow them. I can call them at all hours of the morning and night, ask them questions, because they realize that I'm serious about my craft, and God has given them to me as mentors and as friends. So number one, you got to outline some realistic goals, not just goals, but realistic goals, and then find out what are the steps to achieving those goals. And one of the easiest ways to find out those steps is look for someone who's achieved that. And then third, surround yourself with some good people.
But you note so carefully outlining realistic goals. I might have a long-term plan to be a boxer, an athlete, the best football player, best soccer player in the world. I might aspire to be the biggest businessman in town. How do you help me to identify what we call short-term goals against long-term goals, and what are realistic goals from unrealistic goals?
Like again, if you're 5'3" and you're 20, you've already probably hit your growth spurt. You're not going to be, or you may not have a realistic shot at the NBA, but there has been Muggsy Bogues, there has been Spud Webb. So what did Spud Webb, what did Muggsy Bogues do in order to be 5'3", 5'5", 5'9", and starting on NBA teams? Well, they probably had to change their diet. They had to hit the gym. They had to do a number of things, like as a point guard in basketball, one of the things that is very important is your ability to handle the ball. You might want to walk around everywhere you go dribbling a tennis ball. Those are the short-term goals to realizing that long-term goal. And so, working on your handles, working on your endurance, working on your body, curtailing some things in your diet. Okay, I'm no longer 200 pounds. I'm now 120 pounds. Okay, I'm closer to that goal. What's the next thing? And so I think those are some of the goals, or the short-term battles you have to win in order to win the long-term war.
And you also point out the importance of finding mentors. A young person today consider themselves to be, when I was 15, I was at the top of my game. I was in the gang, I was running the streets, etc. And you couldn't tell me about finding mentors, because at that time for me, it didn't matter. And how do you help someone to understand what it is?
But in truth, even like when I was in a gang, like when I got in a gang, I was baby Snap. There was Big Snap, Little Snap, and then me. You know what I'm saying? And so those guys were the ones who were in, kind of like in charge. Although it wasn't, as detailed as we may think it was. They were in charge with making sure I navigate the gang life. So those were, for lack of a better word, my mentors. Those were what we call the big homies, or the OGs and the triple OGs. And so even if you're going to live a life of crime, somebody out there, you got to realize how realistic or not that is. But you may aspire to be Al Capone. There is always going to be someone who has achieved what you want to achieve, that you have to turn to for answers. And I think that goes without saying. No one is at the top of their game day one. You've looked at somebody else, no matter what it is, whether it's being a great businessman or being an executioner. Somebody has already paved the road before you. You just got to be able to outline and identify who they are, and then whether you have an actual relationship with them or just you're reading or watching them.
And you're also saying that this is can apply to business, education, career-wise,
anything. Absolutely.
You just identify somebody who has already outlined some of the steps, and you work on either following their readings, following their work, following their patterns.
Or if you can, develop a relationship with them.
Or develop a relationship, which is the ultimate.
Absolutely.
And after hearing all of this from Marquise John, would you share with us what are some of the next steps we can look forward?
I just personally want to change the face of evangelism for my denomination and my context. I'm not chasing after being the guy in front of the screen. I'm not chasing after. I just want to follow God, and I feel that if I follow Him wherever He's leading, if God led me to live on the streets as a homeless man in order to reach homeless people, I'd feel like I was a success at being homeless. You know, there was a time when there were things I wanted to achieve for me, and now I've given those up to achieve the things for God. So I can't really tell you what to look for next, but just look for me to continue following God.
And there have been a lot of things that you've been doing. You have been a lot of growth in your ministry. There have been a lot of controversy with the way in which you do things out of the box.
Right.
And that has been a good thing because, like I always said to people, you know, I don't believe comfort gives growth.
Right.
I think discomfort creates growth.
That's why it's called. That's why they're called growing pains.
Growing pains.
And speaking to the controversy, I mean, because I don't want to give people the wrong impression. It is controversial, if you will, in some people's minds just because of the context. I'm not doing anything different than some of my predecessors have done, and so you know, you have to use unconventional methods to reach unconventional people, and
Beautiful.
so that's really what I think has contributed to what people may see as you know, what you call controversy.
That's so good because you've been able to say to us, look, you can move from irrespective of where you are today. You can move from there. You can outline a path. You can identify a goal, list the steps to get there, and then move in that direction by surrounding yourself with positive people.
Absolutely.
And you've been able to tell us how to do that because you've done it from the streets of LA, from the gangs, doing drugs, moving on to being artists, quitting that and becoming a pastor and moving to the top of your game. I'm so happy to have you here today, sharing with us how we can do things, how we can grow, how we can live a better life. Once again, thank you again for being our guest today on Reaching Up.
Thank you very much for having me.
And until next week, I'm so happy that we've been able to have another successful week of showing you how to live better, know better, and then you go out there and do better. Once again, have a good night.